Hey, so we're going to jump into our conversation with Shane Willard right now. And as we said earlier, our broad brush heading for tonight, because we could end up anywhere.
Sure.
Who knows what we're going to end up.
Who knows what's going to happen.
We could end up talking about US politics or whatever. But let's not go there.
No.
That's not good for healthy homes.
Yeah, I know.
Our broad topic is love, respect, and relationship dynamics.
Sure.
Now, you might be thinking, what a random ragtag heading to talk about. The idea comes from scripture where in Ephesians chapter 5 and 6, which we've been looking at in some of our Sunday services recently, particularly in Ephesians 6, well 5, the latter parts of 5, it says that husbands are to love their wives, but then it says wives should respect their husbands.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that there's a distinction there, because why wouldn't it just say husbands love your wives, wives love your husbands, and everyone will be happy?
Right.
But the Bible says no, husbands are looking for respect,
Yep.
whereas the wife is looking for love. Shane, could you maybe unpack the why behind
And
that?
I think the opposite is true. I think the reason you don't have to tell wives to love is because they do that naturally. Like no husband on earth lays in bed at night wondering, I wonder if my wife loves me. That's not a thing. Men actually don't care that much that their wives love them just because they know they do.
Right.
The deep wondering in a man's heart is, I wonder if she believes in me. I wonder if she thinks I'm an idiot.
Right.
Like I wonder if she secretly rolls her eyes going, he's sort of a loser. I wonder if she wishes I made more money. So there's these sorts of thoughts.
I wonder that sometimes.
Yeah, so
This is turning into couples therapy again already.
Yeah, because
I love this.
yeah. So, neither do you have to tell a man be respectful. We learn to be respectful in second grade, or it's
Right.
a fight, right? You don't have to tell, and we tend to give love the most comfortably in the way we receive it. So men find respect acts as loving, and women sort of gag. But the truth of it is women find love acts to be respectful, and men sort of gag. And so the question.
Okay, can you just pause there? Can you give some examples there of when you say a respect act? What
Sure.
does that mean? By the way, feel free to just drop in questions.
Yeah.
We want to make tonight as interactive as we can. Otherwise, we'll just get consumed in this
Yes.
conversation. So in the comments section, drop your questions in. But can you explain what you mean by respect acts or acts of love?
So let's say a husband and wife was sitting in front of me, and the wife has this deep, authentic concern. Let's say they're both, and everything we're going to say tonight assumes a couple things. One, basically good-hearted, and basically mentally healthy, right? Like if you married a lunatic, what can I do? So, but if you're assuming a basically good-hearted, basically mentally healthy woman, and she's going, I just have this deep concern that he doesn't love me, and the basically good-hearted, mentally healthy man goes, what do you mean? I work 10 hours a day.
Right.
I provide. I put this roof here, right? And she goes, right? Why? Because providing and working is an act of respect. And he's asking her to interpret that as an act of love.
Right.
So the issue with words like respect and love are never the words. It's always our imagination of how that word works and functions in our world. So if you have 100 men and you say love, you might get 80 different imaginations how that functions. You get 100 women and say, you need to respect. You could get everything from healthy to unhealthy to fear of being dominated. And so the question isn't what the word is. The question is how do we picture that word functioning in our world? And the good news is that based on some really good research at the University of Washington, based on a groundbreaking book by Dr. Emerson Eggerichs called Love and Respect, we now have some pretty good language around what basically good-hearted, basically mentally healthy women will interpret as love acts, and what basically good-hearted, basically mentally healthy men will interpret as respect acts. And if we can get our head around those behaviors, and by faith, because the respect acts women don't find natural, nor do the men find love acts natural. Both requires faith for us to go, hey, by faith, I'm going to consent to humble myself and meet your needs your way. Because it's okay for your partner to have a different need than you have.
Right.
And as soon as we can get to that, then we can start exploring this a bit more.
So, did you want to jump in?
No, you go. I've got so much respect for you.
Oh, I love you, babe. Can you talk to us then about, because there'll be men who are like, all right, we just jumped in the deep end. Like, we didn't even start with sport questions or anything like that. We're just Wednesday night, sitting on the couch.
Can we talk about The Last Dance?
Yeah.
Michael Jordan Bulls.
Fantastic, amazing.
Yeah.
I respect that.
Yes.
There's men thinking like, all right, you're telling me that working all day, paying the mortgage, putting a roof over my wife's head and the family, you're telling me you're telling me I need to do something more than that.
Yeah.
Help me out, Shane. What would be some basic things that a man could consider doing that wouldn't come naturally, that would be interpreted as love?
So first let's talk about the nature of how love functions best. So love functions best as a function of iconography, not idolatry. Let me explain what I mean by that. So idolatry is anytime we set something external from us as an object that will make us whole, right? And this is very flattering in the attraction phase. So this is when you're looking at you're talking on the phone for 4 hours and it felt like 15 minutes, right? But after you've been married 15 years, to talk on the phone for 4 hours sounds dreadful, right? But it's in the, nobody wants to do that. But it's men or women. But it's in that attraction phase. It's that you complete me, right? Now in the attraction phase, that is really flattering. But once a relationship goes long term, the person can't handle the pressure of being the sole source of your complete feeling.
Yes, right.
So love best functions as a function of the icon, not the idol. An idol is an external thing that we set up to complete us. And if we do that, we can't help but objectify the other person, which is bad. Icon is, there's something about them that draws me deeper. I just want to keep exploring. And so love best functions that way. Love also best functions as a celebration of the sublime, not the perfect, right? So I love the way Jacques Lacan says it. He says, love is giving somebody something you don't have and they don't want it, but they accept you anyway, right? So love is not telling me everything that's great about somebody. Love is owning their flaws and being fully known and fully accepted anyway. And so the research really helps us here in terms of behaviors. So one of the behaviors, this is going to sound really simple, but one of the behaviors that the research showed women receive as love or interpret as love is empathy. Now, men don't find empathy natural. They don't, because men are fixers. So if a woman brings a man a problem, his default instinct is to fix it. And if he can't fix it, he's going to feel like a failure. Right? And so he starts to go fixing it. Well, women don't interpret that as love at all, but that's natural for men. Like if I brought you a problem and said, man, I got this problem, and you would instantly brainstorm 3 possible solutions.
Yes.
And if you brainstorm 3 possible solutions to fix my problem, I would never look at you and go, why are you always trying to fix me? Why don't you just accept me how I am? You brought me a problem, right? So men naturally default to respect acts, which is, I'm going to fix the problem for you. And we feel like a failure if we can't. Whereas the research shows that if you just empathize and allow her to report her emotions and actually use active listening to say back what you heard her say,
right,
that she interprets that as love. And we think, well, that's weird.
And you don't even have to fix the problem. This is fantastic.
Right, and actually, that's the faith moment for men.
Are you saying I can say to Sarah, yeah, I can see that must be really disturbing that the baby has got a dirty nappy.
Yeah.
How are you feeling?
Yeah.
And then just keep watching TV.
I wouldn't recommend that. but the research shows, and this becomes a bit obvious if we just look at how we communicate, right? Like, if let's say a couple has 3 kids and they're being rowdy. Think about the difference between how a man goes in there and how a woman does. So if a man goes in there and says, hey, what's going on in here? And all 3 kids start saying something at once. What's that man going to do? Shut up. You go. You go. One at a time, right? Because we can't think about more than one thing at a time.
Have you been watching Our Home recently?
No.
Those CCTV cameras, like
no, but that's how. But it's just common. But if the mom goes in there and says, "What's going on?" All 3 kids can talk at once, and that mom, without her eyes rolling back in her head, just goes, and she can discern. She can discern what the heck's going on. This is why.
Hang on, is this true?
Yes,
100%
totally.
true. Like this
so
is
complex.
This is why. This is how gifted women are. They are so much more gifted than us. Right? Listen, this is why. So let's say you're at a party, right? If you're allowed to party. Let's say you're at a party, and let's say a guy is in a conversation over there with his mates, right? And he's recalling a story, and he's trying to think, what was that guy's name we ran into? What was that guy's name we ran into? His wife can be 20 feet away in another conversation and go, his name was Bill. It was Bill. You're right, Bill, right? This is how evolved women are. So women can do this, and what happens is men become so singularly solution focused that when what's actually called for in the situation is basic empathy and allowing to report, that what the research shows is that if we can by faith do that, they'll interpret it as a love act.
Right.
Now, for the ladies, if I can help there, you can help this by letting us off the hook by saying, I don't need you to fix this. And that'll relieve us from the fear of failure that we already wonder if you think we're a loser anyway. And if you relieve us from that pressure of having to fix everything, we'll find it more easy to, by faith, be able to just be empathetic.
Shane, with you mentioned before just about active listening. Can you explain a little bit more, in a bit more detail, what that looks like in this kind of dynamic?
Sure. So let's say you present me with a problem, if we role play for a second. So you present me with a problem. Active listening is me restating what you said back to you, maybe using a little different words, only to show you that I heard you. Because we've all had this experience, and men and women both universally hate this. If you're presenting me with something, and my eyes change and my posture changes, and you can tell, I can't wait for you to finish talking so I can give you my thoughts on this. We're already being demeaned,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so what happens is in this dynamic, simply restating it with active listening shows that I've allowed you to report your emotion. And not only that, whether I agree or not, that's not a thing I understand.
From both perspectives.
Yes.
To be doing this.
Yeah, because if I active listening you, if nothing else, whether we agree or disagree, you're like, he heard me. He heard what I was saying.
Right.
Yeah.
Someone at home, and by the way, please keep on dropping in your questions. Someone has asked, how do you start the conversation about what's important to your partner? But can I throw another context in as well? Because there'll be a lot of people who are joining us tonight who they're not married.
Right.
So can I ask, does the love and respect thing translate to just male and female in general? Like
It does.
in relationships to men, whether it's a co-worker or a father or a brother and so forth?
It absolutely does. And for the single person, the idea that you need to find the one is an absurd idea. You need to become the one that the one you're looking for is looking for.
Right.
And quite frankly, if you're believing God for a 10 and on your best day you're a 4, that is what you need to do is become a 7, lower your standards 30%, and something might happen for you, right? So
Maybe you could put in the comment section tonight what number you think you are right now. No, don't do that.
No,
if you really want to just put yourself out there, you can.
Yeah.
You're welcome to.
So the truth of it is that these principles are universal once again, it's stereotyping, but it's stereotyping for a reason.
Yeah.
It's in general. Are there women in this world that would rather feel respected than loved? Sure. Are there men that would rather feel loved than respected? Sure. But in general, these behaviors allow the people that are important to us, even if it's platonic, you can hold up and edify someone's basic dignity and being by being respectful or being loving. And this is what the research shows, the behaviors that are interpreted that way. Not necessarily what we think it is, because what I think love is less important than what the research says most women interpret as loving.
Right.
And vice versa. What I think respect is might be different than what the research says men interpret as respectful.
This might be a little bit random, but the whole concept of love languages, how does that kind of discussion fit into this framework of love and respect?
So the love languages was brought about by Dr. Chapman, and it fits into it's actually a meta set of this. So empathy is universal, but the way someone gives empathy would be, or would rather receive empathy would be love language. And so that's a whole nother like I have friends that would rather you never give them a gift, but if you surprised them by doing the dishes, they would think this person adores me, right?
Right.
And so the love languages are a subset of the principles that the University of Washington and Emerson Eggerichs points out.
Okay.
Someone has asked, becoming the one, what does that look like? Is it my picture of the perfect partner, or is it God's picture of the perfect partner? So maybe if we just unpack that first idea, like becoming the one.
Yeah.
What does that look? What could someone be working on if they say, hey, well, I'm in a single stage of life right now. At some point, I'd like to be married.
Yep.
Where would they start?
Well, I would, you could start with a basic question like, what kind of man, what kind of man would I want in my life? And that kind of man, what kind of woman would he be looking for? And so, so once you've started to define those parameters, then you can do things like get skills and educate yourself, practice on certain behaviors that you don't find normal to you, but rather they might be more useful or more wise. Very few men that you would respect would put up with somebody yelling at them all the time, right? So I want a man I can respect, but I want him to put up with me putting him down. Well,
it's not going to work.
It can't work because by the very nature of him allowing you to put him down is going to make you disrespect him.
Right.
And so one of the things we could work on is being kind with our words and affirming with our words. That's just one caricature of an example. And and from the guy's side, if you want a woman to respect you, well, you got to ask yourself, what sort of things are respectable? Well, having a job would be good. Getting up before 11. That's pretty basic. Having a basic demeanor of helping around the house. These are things that women respect, because I'll give you an example. So the three things that I took from the research was empathy. All right, so working on becoming a person of empathy. The second one was reminiscing, that women tend to interpret reminiscing about memories, like remember when we did this? Remember we did that? They interpret that as love.
Right.
That is weird for us. Like for a man, we have to by faith engage in stuff like that. Like I would never say to you, Bo, do you remember that outfit I was wearing at that conference in East London we put on together? Like,
I do remember the outfit. It was pretty special.
Yeah, it's pretty right. We never do that. You'd never go, hey Harry, you remember that tux I wore at your wedding? I mean, we don't do that. But what the research shows is that when we reminisce with women, that they interpret that as love. And I think about my 85-year-old granny had a container of just little notes that my grandfather from like 50 years ago.
Wow.
And
That's so cute.
Right, see? And see and she had dementia.
Right.
At the last end, but even in the mild stages of dementia where she could who are you again? She would still, hey, I remember when he right? So they interpret that as love. And so when we know what people interpret as love, or we know what people interpret as respect, then we can work on ourselves to build those behaviors around our life and make them more natural.
I'm really interested to know, because we're talking about love and respect from the passage in Ephesians, and that's where the research, or that's kind of how the conversation was kicked off, which is relevant for us now. But what was the relevance of that, and how was that interpreted to the original audience?
Well, the original audience, that would have been incredibly revolutionary.
So we're talking first century.
First century.
Yeah.
This is the greatest time ever to be a woman. Not even close. Is God done redeeming women's rights? No. Is it better than it's ever been? Oh my goodness. Just think about the plight of women in my grandma's generation versus today. It's not even close. So you think about Paul was fighting for women to be treated as people in first century Rome.
Right. So this would be a major thought for some people tonight, because some would just assume, no, well, the Bible is sexist.
It is, but it's in a way that is balancing the scales.
Right. Can you talk to us about?
Yeah, Paul's writing into a world that women weren't even, in some cases, unless you're in the real high class, they weren't even considered people. Like, you're talking, people of lower classes would regularly trade their 13-year-old daughters to senators for the promise of some version of, like, this was the ultimate objectification. It was common to walk down a main street of a main city, and there were lower class women forced to be temple prostitutes in an act of worship to some pagan god. And Paul, Paul's writing in Ephesus about, hey, husbands, hey, really love, hey, these are people made in the image of God. For in Christ there's no such thing as male or female,
Right.
Jew nor Greek, slave nor free. What? Like, Paul is ravishing the framework of the social class system of the Roman Empire.
Right.
Like, if people actually believe that, it's going to make the world better. But
Yes.
you imagine trying to, this was one of the most revolutionarily kind things.
Wow.
This was, the women in Ephesus would have went, we want to join that movement.
Right.
Hey, this thing with Belial, where we could be forced to enter into sexual activity as an act of worship in public with somebody we don't know, that day's over. We'd rather come over here.
Jumping in, assuming Belial was a pagan god.
He was
or a god.
a pagan god
Yes.
in Corinth, and in other places, Mithra, Attis, Adonis, Horus. Kibble was actually a goddess in Ephesus, but she tormented men. So what Paul's trying, like, Kibble required this. I'll try to say this appropriately, but it's just historical fact. Kibble required the testicular sacrifice in order to bring food. She was in charge of bringing food. So before you went on a hunt, you would give an offering to Kibble and say, "Oh, please bring food in our way." The problem was she was also the goddess of protecting small animals. So, for instance, in ancient,
This god sounds like I'm really grateful for, the God of the Bible.
Yes, exactly. And so there's this one story in history in Sardis where there was a famine and they kept bringing more money and it wasn't working. So these guys self-castrated to show that they were loyal to this female goddess, which is, and that was in Sardis, right outside of Ephesus, same goddess. And so when Paul shows up in Ephesus, you can see why the church took off. His message was, hey, I serve a God that loves you just because, will feed you just because, and you can keep all your bits intact, right? And people
Hey, man,
are like,
who's not signing up for that, right?
Hey, we're in. So Paul was setting men free from the oppressive female goddess, but he was also setting women free from the oppressive Roman social class system.
Right.
And it was we are all one in Christ.
Yes.
That I could never purposely harm Sarah, male or female, irregardless. I could never purposely harm her because the same Christ that's holding me together is holding her together. So to harm her, I'm coming against the spirit of the one that's holding us all together. And that would be terrible. So what if it wasn't a belief on a pamphlet? What if we actually believed that Christ was holding us all together and we were all actually, we would never, there would be no misogyny, there would be no racism.
Right.
You couldn't.
Right.
Same God holding us all together. This was a revolutionary thing.
Right.
Somebody has written in a question, what can women do to show men respect?
Well, let's talk about that. So,
Yeah, let's talk about that. Let's go there.
So the research showed basically 6 things. I chose 3 because of time. So for women, it was empathy, it was reminiscing, and it was not being secretly angry. That when there's conflict, you bring it full circle, and that has to do with how women handle conflict a bit differently than men. If women have conflict, they tend to have a blow up, a storm off, and then when they come back, there's some sort of resolution. They're not going to let it just sit. There's some sort of, and then they go forward. Men don't do that. If you and I had a big conflict and you're walking away from me, I would never go, Dustin, you get back here right now and talk to me. Right? It would just never. It would. Well,
never actually, before the cameras are rolling, no.
Right. You would never do that, right? But then let's say we have an encounter later and we haven't. Men are actually okay not fixing it. Right? We're okay sitting.
That's so funny because we want to fix it with practical things, but relationally,
let's just
not fix it.
Let's just watch a 30 for 30, and let's watch a sports documentary.
Yeah, perfect.
So now for men, the men, the research centers around a couple of things. It's said a couple different ways. One of the ways to show respect to a man that they interpret it that way is to, with your mouth, verbalize your honor for his responsibility to lead. And this is really important, that What a feminist will tell you is that a man thinks he has a right to lead. Not basically good-hearted, mentally healthy men. And there would be men like that, and they're jerks, 100%. But a basically good-hearted, mentally healthy man doesn't think he has a right to lead. He feels the responsibility to lead, which is two different things, right? If an intruder came in your house tonight, are you going to flip a coin to who goes confront him, right? The weight of having to die for your family, if something happened, that is worth respecting, and it's worth saying. Like, think about a cruise ship, right? When they're doing the fire drills or whatever, what do they always say? Women and children first, right? What are the men doing? Yes, we die, right? Yep, we die. And see, here's the thing. The one place in the world that men get unconditional respect is the military.
Right.
And what do they do in the military? They serve and they die. The truth is, if you give a basically good-hearted, basically mentally healthy man unconditional respect, he'll serve you and he'll die for you. And that centers around verbalizing with your mouth your honor for his responsibility, and verbalizing with your mouth. This, I know this is going to sound weird. Women, they don't. It's not a thing for most women, but verbalizing with your mouth that he makes enough. That he's not wondering. One of the biggest concerns of women is, will he still find me attractive as I age? One of the biggest. Men don't care about that. Look at us. Like, we don't care.
I often say Sarah's like a good wine and I'm like milk. Like, she's just getting better with every year, whereas I went off a few years ago.
And at some point we just realize it's inevitable.
Yeah,
right?
it's fine.
Like,
it's
what?
fine. Just pull the ripcord, let go, watch sports documentaries.
Yeah, we're not obsessing about.
I'm hearing.
I wonder if she still finds me attractive. Like, it's not a thing. But we do wonder if we're enough. So, like, I'll give you an example. So if we're out at Mooloolaba, and the hottest woman in all of the Sunshine Coast walks into the restaurant, who's going to notice first, the men or the women? The women. The woman. And they hate her. They don't even know her. She ain't done nothing to them. She's just hot, right? They hate her, right? The men will notice second. But if that woman walks by and that man goes, whoo, now that's going to hurt that woman's feelings.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
I only ever did that once.
Right, exactly. But let's reverse the role, and let's say the best looking man in the Sunshine Coast walks in. Like, it looks like somebody drew this guy, right? and the woman goes, whoa, did you see that? Wow. We're not even we're not hurt by that. We're like, oh, well, get preheated. You're coming home with me. That don't matter. Like, sir, can you come over and show her your abs? Like, we don't care about that. But what if somebody walked in, really well dressed, and she said, hey, that's John. Did you hear? He got promoted 3 times this year. He now makes 3 times more money than you. Boy, I wish you were as successful as he is.
Right. Game over.
Now, so to answer the question there, respect for men comes down to these 3 things for tonight's purposes: is expressing with your mouth that you honor the fact that he would die for you. Secondly, that you express with your mouth that he makes enough, that he is enough. I know women don't get this, but the amount of things that consume a man's psyche regarding size is everywhere. Trucks, houses, bank accounts, and it has been since we were kids. And so you're not going to get that out of us. And then the third thing was, men interpret you believe in me when you initiate sexuality. So when the woman is the initiator of sexuality, I know this is weird. No woman's thinking, I'm going to show my respect and by initiation. No woman's thinking that. But the research shows that men interpret the initiation of sexuality as, oh, she does believe in me. She does. She believes in me. And sexuality is one of those weird sort of things where nothing is a nice, neat cookie cutter. There's hormones, there's drive, there's age, there's stress, there's illness, there's fear, there's some guys have less testosterone, some guys have more testosterone, some women have more, so it's not a cookie cutter answer, and so there's not a one answer for what that should look like, as long as you're on the same page and no one is using it as a weapon. Because if the only reason a man is being loving to his wife is to get points so he can cash it in later, well, it's robbing both of you of the opportunity to participate in something more profound. And if the only reason a woman is doing respectful things is to get points that she can cash in later, it's robbing both of something far more profound than that. I hope that answers the question.
Someone has asked a question. How do you, obviously it's come from a lady, how do you help your husband to lead? Like if you feel like, okay, he's not leading and I wish that he was leading more.
Well, once again, that would be a specific question about a specific circumstance. And for tonight, we're dealing with caricatures because we have to.
Yeah.
But one idea would be to make sure, I would start with those three things. Because confidence breeds risk, right? So if you're finding somebody not forthcoming and hey, initiative and all that, it's not your fault. But if you're, without laying blame on anybody, if you're frustrated with that, I love the way Romans 14 says it. It says let's quit judging each other and only judge yourself in whether you're becoming a stumbling block to the outcome you're looking for.
Right.
I think that's great advice.
Right.
Like, if something about your partner's frustrating you, the thing you don't want to do is try to control them, because to the level you're trying to control them is the level you're failing to love them. But what you do want to do is take charge of what you can do, which is do everything you can do to empower his confidence. How do you empower their confidence? You make them feel believed in. How do you do that? Well, you verbalize with your mouth that you believe in his giving. You speak it into them, whether you see it or not, and draw that out of it. That's what we do with everything in faith. Is you call things that are not as though they were, and they
start to appear.
So if you affirm his responsibility taking, and you affirm his desire to work and provide, and you initiate sexuality to an appropriate level for your situation. What'll start happening is it might start surprising you how much confidence that person gains, and how much they will then step up to the plate.
Right.
This might have already been answered, but somebody's asked if the woman is actually the bread maker or the breadwinner in the relationship. How would you approach that in terms of still showing respect?
Yeah, well, that's a touchy one, isn't it? Because, like in my mom's a very successful executive, and the truth of it is because of that, it wouldn't bother me psychologically if the woman I was with made 10 times more than me. I'd be like, come on then, bring it, right? Like, hello, right? But it's also important that never becomes a weapon. For women to men, I would say it's very important to say that money and sex never become the weapon. Money and sex should always be used to relieve stress and enhance closeness, not create it. I hear the tone of that lady's question, because if she's in a situation where she feels like she has to walk on eggshells because of an ego, like what if I hurt his ego? That's a hard situation too. And so it might just be a matter of making sure that she purposely reaffirms him with her mouth. If I could tell a story about this, because I thought of a good story. It happens to be a true story. So one of the great African American pastors in history was a guy named E.V. Hill. And E.V. Hill was an amazing guy. And I think they were married, him and his wife were married 63 years or something. Something amazing. And she died before he did. And he had to do her funeral. Now, think about it. If you got 60 years of material to pull from, that's a lot for one lady's funeral, right? Out of all the stories he could tell about her, here's the story he told. He said, in that real African American, good, awesome preacher.
Yeah. Everyone wants that preaching voice.
Yeah, I'm not even gonna try to do it because it'd be bad. He said, I stand before you today as whatever I am because of my wife. She's the greatest person I ever knew. He said, and let me tell you why. This is out of 60 years, this was his story. He said, when we were young, first married, he said, I was broke. I was trying to get the church going. I was working 2 jobs. He said, I came home one night and I opened the door and she was making a candlelight dinner. And he said, I thought, wow, this is going to be good, right? And he said, I went in and I went into the bathroom to wash up because I sort of smelled from working, And I walked into the bathroom and I, when it's your own bathroom, you know where the light switch is. I closed the door and I flipped the, and it took me 3 goes before I realized that light ain't coming on.
Right.
It wasn't the switch. So I washed my hands and I sat on the seat on the toilet and I wanted to die. He said if I could have stayed in there forever, I would. He said, because I realized that she wasn't making a candlelight dinner. The electricity didn't get paid.
Right.
And he said terror and dread filled my heart. I knew she was going to think I was a loser. I was trying my best and I knew she was going to think I was a loser. And he said, I realized I can't stay in there forever. So I opened the bathroom door and I went in and I took her by the hand and I looked down at the ground because I was too ashamed. And he said, I'm so sorry. I'm doing my best. I couldn't pay the electric bill. I'm so sorry. He said, I couldn't hardly bear the embarrassment. And he said, and she took my chin and did that.
Wow.
And she said, hey, there's nobody on earth I'd rather be with than you. No one on earth I believe in more than you. There's nobody else that could possibly be for me what you are. You are enough. We'll handle the electricity tomorrow, but tonight we dine by candlelight.
Right.
And he said in that moment that she could have destroyed me, but because she believed in me when I didn't necessarily deserve it, it made me who I am. So, and if you're sitting there with your spouse, if you look at the men right now, they're tearing up a little bit because
they're running outside of the power box to flick the power off.
Yeah,
just to see.
Because that story illustrates how much that kind of affirmation matters. Because you don't. The easiest way to motivate someone is to meet their biggest needs consistently and predictably. If you're inconsistent, unpredictable, that is a disaster. But consistently and predictably meeting their biggest need is massive. And you don't meet their need because they deserve it. You meet their need because they're worth it.
Right.
Because sometimes your husband will be worthy of your respect. Other times he's going to be sort of an idiot. That's life. Sometimes your wife will deserve your love. Sometimes not so much. But you don't love her because she deserves it. You love her because she's worth it.
Right.
You don't respect him because he deserves it. You respect him because he's worth it. And I think it's important to remember that all of us are on a journey of this, and that we don't use anything I'm saying tonight as a weapon against the other, but rather a mirror for ourselves to go, how can I be better in my part?
Yeah.
This is so good.
Totally.
I hope everyone's enjoying it, and please let us know what you're enjoying and what's helping. And
I'm curious about what you've said just now and also earlier about particularly sex and money being used as a weapon. I'm thinking for anyone or any of us that are listening and you're thinking, in my relationship, this has been used as a weapon.
Yeah.
Where do we go from there?
I think first would be, and I mean this in the most non-shame-based sense I could possibly say this word, repentance. That repentance is not a shame-based activity. Repentance is, you know what? I realize that is not bringing life and light. It's bringing disrepair, death, and darkness. And I'm going to change the way I think about this. I mean, the truth of it is that if you've had a habit of using sex or money as a weapon, just stop and ask yourself, did it produce what you were trying to get out of it?
Right.
Right? Like, is it your right to withhold sex? Yeah. It's your body? Absolutely. Is it wise? No. Is it wise to use a weapon? No. Is if you're the breadwinner, let's say in this example the man makes more money than the woman, is it your right to control is it your right? Yeah. Sure. Making things about is this right or is this wrong is so destructive because it's the first lie ever recorded in the Bible. And it was told by a talking snake. We should remember it. When a talking snake tells a lie, remember the lie. And that lie is, organize your life really well around good and evil, it'll enhance your life. No,
right.
Because there's a lot of things that aren't wrong, but they're not wise.
Yes.
And they're not useful.
Right.
And so I think the first place you start is to go, hang on, if I've used it as a weapon, I'm sorry. And I'm not going to be perfect, but I'm going to intend not to. Because particularly with sex, money's different, but particularly with sex is so complex from different drives and desires and hormones and all this. It's hard to go do this. But I think anybody knows in their heart that I'm loving or unloving with the way I handle my sexuality with my partner. Because remember, for both of you, you're the only legitimate outlet that your partner has.
Right.
And if your partner explores any other outlet, it's going to really upset you. So you can't really say, have eyes only for me, but I control every bit of this with no self-serving, no self-giving anything. And so I think as long as we examine our hearts and we legitimately go, am I using either one of these areas as a weapon? I think we can trust the Spirit of God to move our hearts. And then it's really important not to just leave that as belief, but actually in behavior.
Now, we've probably got time for maybe 2 or 3 more questions. We've had a question around just the idea of a marriage covenant and what that meant in the Jewish context. I guess some people today would see marriage as a bit more like a contract and enter into it, enter out of it, whereas covenant is a big idea in the Jewish context. Can you unpack what that idea is?
Well, the original Jewish covenant of marriage actually had the idea of a contract within it. It was deeper than a contract, but inside it was called a ketubah.
Right.
So a ketubah was a basic agreement between two people how we're going to treat each other. When I did a lot of premarital counseling years ago, I used to always make them write a ketubah, and it wasn't something that you can use as a gun on somebody. But wait a minute, we
like establishing the ground rules.
Yeah, like this is what's acceptable, this is what's unacceptable. So in an ancient Jewish world, when they got married at 13, right? Because everybody did. What they would do is they would sit with their dads, and this is a caricature, but it has to be. So basically, if I was with somebody, I would write the things in the ketubah I wanted, and she would write the things in the ketubah she wanted, and then our parents were there for 2 reasons: wisdom and witness. Because a parent can go, I know you think that's going to happen. That's
right.
That's not reasonable, right? And I could put anything I wanted, anything she wanted, so long as we both agreed. Because how can 2 walk together lest they be agreed? And then once the ketubah was finalized, and this is beautiful. You'll recognize this from Jesus. We would stand, and I would say, "Will you marry me?" Like based on this. This is the "Will you marry me?" And of course by that point she'd say yes. And then I would say, "I go to prepare a place for you, that where I am, there you may be also."
Right.
And she would say, "Well, when are you going to come back to receive me unto yourself?" And I would say, "I don't know the day or the hour, but when my Father approves the wedding chamber I'm building for you, I'll come back. So be ready."
Right.
Right. So when Jesus is using language like that, the first century hearers would have went, Does God want to have a relationship with us?
Wow.
He doesn't want to be existent outside of us and lord over us. He actually wants to be in our lives.
Wow.
Right. But then once that marriage happened, the ketubah was the accountability. So if either person was breaking their agreement, you would confront it with 3 steps, and you'll recognize this quickly: a one-on-one confrontation, a 2-on-1 confrontation, and then a spiritual leaders on one confrontation. And so let's say here was one thing that was in every ketubah was the doctrine of oil, bread, and shelter. So that was where the man would commit to having good work ethic, right? Remember back then women didn't have the rights to work like they did. And so let's say the man, he's not between jobs, he's drinking Jack Daniels at 9 a.m. lazy, right? Well, the woman didn't have to put up with that. The woman would have to confront him one-on-one, respectfully, and go, "Look, I love you, but you're breaking the agreement. I'm not feeling safe here." And if he repented, you couldn't take it any further, right? But if you didn't, you would go get your dad, 2-on-1. Why? Because he witnessed it.
Right.
Say, "Listen, we love you, but you're breaking your agreement here." And if you repented, it could go no further. If you didn't, they would go get the spiritual leaders. And the spiritual leaders would send a minion over. A minion is 10 men.
Right.
And the 10 men would go, "Hey,
we're bringing a posse now." Like.
Yeah, because your laziness is affecting the whole community.
Right.
And if this family breaks down, it affects all of us.
Yeah, wow.
So we're going to hold you accountable to this, right?
Which is so foreign to the idea of, well, what I do is up to me, and it's my life. It's got, who are you to judge?
Yeah. Almost never true. Like if it's just between you and God, do whatever you want. God can handle you.
Right.
But your actions almost always affect the whole. And so I know it's a caricature, but that was the covenant was based on an agreement that people were held accountable to.
Right.
That's why God eventually in the Old Testament had to divorce Israel, because he married Israel.
Right.
And then he had in Ezra, Jeremiah, it says, I had to divorce you because you were unfaithful to your agreement.
Right.
So marital unfaithfulness wasn't just adultery. It included adultery, but marital unfaithfulness was breaking your basic agreement, and not a mistake, but an unrepentant pattern through
Yes.
3 witnesses.
Right.
Yeah.
One last question, or have we got time for?
We've maybe got time for 2.
Let's see where it goes.
I think our moms are still watching.
Yeah.
How do we go about creating a community where we can be really honest like that within a relationship? Maybe it hasn't been the culture of your relationship up until this point, but you want to create that culture.
So I think there's 3 words around that. 1 is consistency. 2 is predictability. So and then 3rd is authenticity. So if let's say a man says, I want my wife to be more open with me, but then when I talk to her, she goes, Shane, last time I told him 1/2 of one concern, he flew off the handle, disappeared for 7 hours at the bar, right? So I'm just gonna, and so
Right.
we have to make sure that there's an alignment between what we say we want and our behavior,
Yes.
right? So a lady can't say, I want my husband to be honest with me, if when he's honest with her, she goes nuts.
Or shuts down.
Or shuts down. And actually in the research, men tend to, when they get upset, they tend to isolate and just shut down, right?
Right.
Yeah.
No.
And so
Just focus on the interview, please.
One of the best pieces of advice I ever heard was I was doing a conference on sexuality in Adelaide with Dr. Patricia Werrican, right? And she made this point that I sort of knew theoretically, but never heard it applied like this. She talked about a psychological phenomenon called limerence, and limerence is the involuntary rush of dopamine in your brain when you're in someone's presence. It's the initial attraction phase. It's why you feel addicted to somebody, right? But that dopamine's going to wear off, right? And she said this. She said, if you're here and you're married, right, at some point, limerence for someone else might affect your husband or your wife, because it's involuntary. You're
Right.
like, man, why do I feel addicted to that person? And she was talking to the ladies, and she said, if your husband can't come home from work and honestly and authentically and respectfully and lovingly say, nothing has happened, but I don't know what, this person's got my attention, and I just want you to know, because putting it into the light is going to remove its
Yes.
power.
Yeah, wow.
If he can't do that without you losing it and showing up at his work and telling her, right, he's going to keep it to himself.
Right.
And if he keeps it to himself, so the authenticity and the openness
Wow.
comes from being consistently and predictably a demeanor of peacemaking and calm, to know that no one's going to be disrespected if they're honest, open, and authentic, and no one's going to be unloved if they're honest, open, and authentic. And in other words, if any place should be a safe place, it should be the home. And is that an easy thing? No, it's simple to explain, but it's more difficult and complex to execute.
Yeah, of course.
But you can. I would say it, because I know this has got to wind down, but I'll summarize the whole night. Great teachers try to summarize everything in a sentence. So I would say it this way. I'll just look at the camera here and speak to the people. You ladies, if your son married a woman like you, would you be happy for him? And if not, why not? Choose to change, because he's going to marry a woman like you. And it's not because of Oedipus. It's because he thinks you're normal. And you men, if your daughter married a man like you, would you be happy for her? If your daughter married a man who treated her like you treat her mother, would you celebrate that? And if not, it's time to change. Because she's gonna. It's not for any weird reason. She thinks you're normal. So may we become the type of people that we would celebrate our children marrying if they married someone like us. If we hold ourselves to that standard, we don't need to worry about changing the other person. I think it would organically change itself.
I think that's a
I'm
really,
actually
really good
so
way to wrap it up. Thank you so much for tonight,
Thank you, Shane.
for interacting with live questions. It's been super
Pleasure.
helpful. Please let us know in the comments if you feel it's appropriate to let us know what's been helpful, and more than anything, really, let's take those principles home and
Yeah.
start applying them. That's the biggest challenge.
Put it into behavior.
Now, this Sunday, for our Sunday services, this Sunday is Mother's Day. That's like a couple of day warning for those of you who have maybe forgotten.
Yeah.
And so this Sunday, we're going to be continuing our Healthy Home series. But we are talking from the 5th commandment, which is honour your mother and father.
Yeah.
Shane is our guest this Sunday for our service. Can you just maybe give us like
Sure.
a 30-second advertisement for what we're going to talk about this Sunday?
Yeah, so as soon as you said that, I could feel the angst with some people. Like that's the one command that's like, for some people, that's like the easiest one. Oh, my parents were awesome. Easy.
Right.
For others, it's like, that's pain. So there's people who be watching this right now, and you purposely avoid going to church on Mother's and Father's Day because someone's going to use the Bible to tell you to honor somebody who wasn't honorable. And I'm going to ask you to do something brave. If you would give us 50 minutes, an hour of your time this Sunday, and tune in. What you're going to find is that there's a more beautiful narrative to what it meant in the Bible to honor somebody. You're going to find your life empowered, and you might end up being the hero of your family tree because you tuned in Sunday. So I'm going to urge you to be brave, and by faith, give the Spirit of God a chance to reframe the imagination of what that might mean, because I promise you, it's more beautiful than you think.
Excellent. Thank you again, Shane. This Sunday we launch new service times as well. So as of this Sunday in Australia and in South Africa, in those local time zones, our services are 8 a.m, 9 a.m, 11 a.m, 4 p.m, 5 p.m, 7 p.m. Nailed it. So
Nailed it.
That's this
I'm
Sunday.
impressed, mate.
So same service all day. So join us as Shane. Invest an hour. I promise you, you will catch some keys that could just change the future of your family. And so that's this Sunday. Thank you again for joining us. Anything else we need to add?
No, we'll see you Sunday.
See you then.
See you Sunday.